I had the opportunity to speak with Paola Giangiacomo, the host of Battling Opioids. She describes what you will see and hear in Part 6, which airs September 24th at 8 p.m. Paola also reflects on the previous programs and what information helps her as she raises her children, as well as a personal, unexpected connection to the topic.
Part 6 is timely because it airs right after Governor Wolf signed the 11th disaster declaration for the opioid epidemic, which will help combat this epidemic and ease a lot of restrictions. The pandemic has caused a lot of isolation, anxiety, stress, which just makes dealing with an epidemic during a pandemic worse. We have Ray Barishansky from the state. We also have Senator Gene Yaw, who's been a recurring guest. He represents the 23rd Senatorial District, and he is the chairman of the Center for Rural Pennsylvania. He discusses how difficult the pandemic is for people who are either in recovery or just struggling with substance use disorder, because in rural counties, internet is sketchy. During this pandemic, fortunately, people have been able to access telehealth, Zoom, to meet with counselors. There is no longer in-person group meetings. But in rural areas, if internet is sketchy, not only do you not have access to in-group personal meetings, but you also may not have access to the internet. So you can't Zoom, you can't do telehealth. So he really talked about the importance of increasing broadband and just improving overall internet access in rural counties of Pennsylvania. In these videos that you'll see in Battling Opioids Part 6, we'll meet a mom who is in recovery, but while in recovery, she's going through the stress of the unknown, the anxiety from the pandemic, the stress from homeschooling, all of that, which was hard for someone not going through substance use disorder. But imagine going through recovery and also having the added stress of everything else that's going on during the pandemic. The New York Times referred to COVID-19 as a national relapse trigger. Through this woman's story, you can kind of understand how difficult it is. So I thought that was very interesting to hear her story. And it also highlights another story about a wife of a physician. She, like many, had surgery and was prescribed pain medication. Well, right away, she became addicted. And she talks about how easy it was for her to get meds because her husband was a physician. And she talked about there is success. Like, you can get through this dark time and you can recover. And she even said it herself. There is no better life than being a sober mom and wife. So it's a positive story.
What are some of the highlights that stand out for you from the shows we've done so far?
The videos are always interesting, and they put a personal face to this epidemic. And you can see and hear how people struggle. It's one thing to hear the senator and Ray Barishansky from the state and I talk about it. But when you hear the struggles coming from the people themselves who are going through recovery, it really adds a personal touch, and it makes you empathetic to what they're going through.
Is there something you've learned from doing these programs that resonated with you and your family?
Well, in a couple of our Battling Opioids programs, we had Tammy from the Tunkhannock Area School District. She counsels children, and she talked about the importance of talking to children from a very young age about substance abuse. It may start with simple things, how to avoid alcohol and drugs. And it just hit home for me because I have 2 children. And I asked her, I said, well, when do you have to start talking to your kids? When is it a good idea? She said, as early as 5, 6 years old. And it is important because you don't realize with access to the internet these days, kids know more than you may think they know. So if you can just have family conversations, according to Tammy, about right and wrong, good and bad. She said, they'll understand. And also for me, as I was doing these series, I had no idea that I had a family member who was struggling with substance abuse. She unfortunately died from an overdose. And here I was hosting these programs, not knowing that it was in my own family. So it really does go to show you that this can affect anyone from any socioeconomic class. It just makes you realize how prevalent this issue is, and that there are stigmas out there, that it only affects certain people who live under bridges. It doesn't. It can affect your next door neighbor, your family member, your best friend, and it could all be happening right in front of you. So I think this highlights the fact that it is a prevalent issue and it can affect anyone. And if we can help at least one person, then we've done our job. And I've learned this personally, that when someone dies from a drug overdose, what are they leaving behind? Children, perhaps? Well, who's left to raise those children? Well, it falls on the grandparents. In one of our programs, we spoke to grandparents who are struggling. They thought they were ready to retire. And here they are starting all over, raising kids again. And they didn't ask for this new role. So in that one episode, we talked about, resources that are out there and counseling programs. Again, another program that really hits home and makes you realize this doesn't just affect the drug user. This affects all communities and all people in the entire state. You may not realize it, but it really does have a widespread effect.